The catalyst for change. The airport terminal buzzed with activity. Travelers shuffled through security lines, flight announcements crackled over the speakers, and luggage wheels hummed against the tiled floor. Among the throng, Dr. Amanda Williams, a prominent black billionaire, moved with a calm yet commanding presence. Dressed impeccably in a tailored pantsuit and carrying a designer briefcase, Amanda's mere presence turned heads. Yet she paid no attention to the curious glances or hushed whispers. Years of breaking barriers in a world that wasn't built for her had taught Amanda to walk with quiet confidence. Amanda had just wrapped up a whirlwind week of negotiations for her tech company's expansion into emerging markets. Exhausted but triumphant, she was ready to sink into the plushed comfort of her first-class seat on Flight 378, bound for her home city. She arrived at the gate well ahead of schedule, her boarding pass in hand, and approached the counter to confirm her seat. The attendant behind the desk smiled politely but appeared nervous. "Good afternoon, ma'am," the attendant said, glancing at her computer screen. Amanda handed over her boarding pass, and the attendant's expression faltered slightly. "Ah, it seems there's been a mix-up with your seat assignment. I'm terribly sorry, but your first-class seat is no longer available." Amanda frowned, a sharp pang of irritation flickering in her chest. "That can't be right. I booked this ticket weeks ago and confirmed it just yesterday. My seat is 2A. The attendant hesitated, avoiding Amanda's gaze. "I understand, Dr. Williams, but unfortunately, we'll need to move you to a different seat. Economy, I'm afraid." A wave of disbelief washed over Amanda. Economy. She had paid a premium for her first-class ticket, not just for comfort, but for the respect it symbolized, a hard-earned privilege that reflected years of relentless effort in her career. "That's unacceptable," Amanda replied, her voice steady but firm. "This ticket is confirmed, and I expect to sit in the seat I paid for." The attendant's eyes darted nervously toward the gate door. "Let me call someone to assist," she said, picking up the phone. Minutes later, Captain Jack Turner appeared, his imposing frame filling the gate area. He was the embodiment of an experienced pilot, with silver-streaked hair and a meticulously pressed uniform. Yet his demeanor was far from welcoming. His gaze swept over Amanda with a flicker of disdain, and his tone carried an air of impatience. "What's the problem here?" he demanded. Amanda turned to face him, meeting his gaze with unwavering composure. "The problem," she said calmly, "is that my confirmed first-class seat has apparently been reassigned without explanation. I'd like to know why." Captain Turner's jaw tightened. "Your seat isn't available. You'll need to take a different one or wait for the next flight." Amanda raised an eyebrow. "That's not acceptable. I have a ticket for 2A, and I intend to use it." The captain's irritation deepened. "Listen, Mom," he said curtly, "this is my plane, and I have the final say. I suggest you cooperate before you make things worse for yourself." The condescension in his voice was like a slap in the face. Amanda, accustomed to navigating spaces where she was underestimated, stood her ground. "I don't believe you have the authority to revoke a ticket that I've paid for and confirmed. I'm not moving." The tension between them thickened, drawing the attention of nearby passengers. Some watched with quiet curiosity, while others whispered amongst themselves. The room felt charged, the kind of quiet chaos that precedes an inevitable storm. Captain Turner took a step closer, his tone now sharp and commanding. "Ma'am, you're disrupting the boarding process. I don't care who you are or how much you paid for that seat. Either you move, or I'll have security escort you off the plane." Amanda's chest tightened, but she refused to waver. "You have no right to treat me this way. I've done nothing wrong, and I won't be intimidated into giving up my seat." What happened next unfolded so quickly that it left everyone in stunned silence. Captain Turner, his face a mask of frustration, reached out and forcibly shoved Amanda back from the gate door. The force of his push sent her stumbling, her briefcase dropping to the ground with a thud. Gasps rippled through the crowd as Amanda caught herself, her shoulder throbbing from the impact. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. Amanda, breathing heavily, straightened herself, her gaze locking onto the captain with a mix of shock and simmering anger. Around her, passengers murmured in disbelief, yet no one stepped forward to intervene. The weight of their silence was suffocating. Security officers arrived within moments, their expressions tense as they assessed the situation. One of them, a woman with a professional but cautious demeanor, approached Amanda. "Ma'am, we need you to step away from the gate," she said, her tone measured. Amanda's voice was steady, but her hands trembled. "I'm not going anywhere. I have every right to be here." "Please, ma'am," the officer repeated, glancing uneasily at the captain, who stood with his arms crossed, radiating authority. Amanda felt the heat of humiliation rising in her chest. Reluctantly, she picked up her briefcase and stepped aside, her mind racing. As she was escorted out of the gate area, Amanda caught snippets of the passengers' hushed conversations. Some expressed outrage at the captain's behavior, while others speculated about what Amanda must have done to provoke him. The sting of their judgment cut deep, but Amanda refused to let it break her. Standing in the terminal, she watched through the glass as the plane taxied toward the runway. Her phone buzzed in her hand, and she glanced down to see a call from her father, Charles Williams. The name on the screen gave her pause. Charles Williams was not just her father. He was a force of nature, a man who had built an empire from the ground up and never hesitated to stand up against injustice. Amanda hesitated, her thumb hovering over the green button. She knew that answering the call would set a chain of events into motion that she couldn't control. But as she replayed the captain's actions in her mind, a fire ignited within her, a determination not just to seek justice for herself, but to challenge the broader system that allowed such behavior to persist. Taking a deep breath, Amanda answered the call. "Daddy," she said, her voice steady but edged with emotion. "Something happened, and you need to hear this." The unfolding storm. The silence between Amanda and her father stretched thin as she recounted the events in a measured tone. On the other end of the line, Charles Williams listened intently, the tapping of his pen against his mahogany desk a rhythmic indication of his growing agitation. Amanda knew her father well enough to recognize the brewing storm in his voice when he finally spoke. "Let me get this straight," Charles said, his voice low and deliberate, a sharp contrast to the fiery anger Amanda knew he was holding back. "This Captain Turner not only dismissed your confirmed first-class seat, but had the audacity to physically shove you, and in front of an entire plane full of passengers." Amanda clenched her jaw, the vivid memory of the captain's dismissive sneer flashing in her mind. "That's exactly what happened, Dad. And what's worse, no one stepped in. They just watched." The silence on the other end felt deafening. Amanda could picture her father leaning back in his chair, rubbing his temple as he processed the implications. Charles Williams wasn't just a billionaire. He was a titan of industry, a man who had fought tooth and nail to carve a space for himself in a world that had tried to shut him out at every turn. To hear that his daughter had been subjected to such blatant disrespect was a blow not just to his pride, but to everything he stood for. "This isn't just about you, Amanda," Charles finally said, his voice taking on the weight of a man who had seen too much injustice in his time. "This is about the message they sent, not just to you, but to anyone who looks like us and dares to claim a space they don't think we deserve. We're not going to let this slide." Amanda sighed, a mix of frustration and exhaustion washing over her. "I don't want this to turn into some public spectacle, Dad. I just wanted to get home. I've worked hard to build my own path, and I don't want people to think I'm using your name to fix this." Charles's laugh was low and bitter. "This isn't about using my name. This is about holding people accountable. If you don't want to stand up for yourself, I'll do it for you." Amanda knew there was no point arguing. When her father made up his mind, there was no swaying him. "Fine," she said, her voice softer now. "But I need to be part of this. This isn't just your fight, it's mine too." Charles's tone softened, a rare moment of vulnerability slipping through. I wouldn't have it any other way, sweetheart. I'll make some calls. Stay close to your phone." The call ended, leaving Amanda alone with her thoughts. She glanced around the terminal, where the world seemed to move on as though nothing had happened. The injustice of it all left a bitter taste in her mouth. She knew this wasn't the first time someone had been treated unfairly, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. But the question lingered. What could she do about it? The airline's headquarters. Meanwhile, at the headquarters of Elite Skyways, the airline operating Amanda's ill-fated flight, chaos was beginning to unfold. Jack Green, the airline's CEO, was in the middle of a board meeting when his assistant burst through the door, her face pale. "Mr. Green, we have a situation," she said, her voice shaking slightly. Green frowned, motioning for the board members to pause. "What kind of situation?" The assistant hesitated, clearly dreading the conversation. "It involves a passenger, Dr. Amanda Williams. She was forcibly removed from her first-class seat by Captain Turner. Apparently, there was a mix-up with the seating arrangements, but it escalated badly." Green's frown deepened. The name Amanda Williams rang a bell, but it wasn't until the assistant added, "She's the daughter of Charles Williams," that the full weight of the situation hit him. "Charles Williams," Green repeated, his voice rising slightly. The board members exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the tension. "As in the Charles Williams, the billionaire tech mogul." The assistant nodded. "Yes, sir. And from what I understand, Captain Turner may have physically pushed her." The room fell silent. Green felt a chill run down his spine. He'd worked hard to build Elite Skyways into one of the top airlines in the country, priding himself on its reputation for exceptional service. A scandal involving the daughter of one of the most powerful black men in the world could unravel everything he'd built. "Get Turner off that plane immediately," Green ordered, his voice tight. "And have legal and PR on the line within the hour. We need to contain this before it spirals out of control." A groundswell of witnesses. Back at the airport, Amanda sat in a quiet corner of the terminal, scrolling through her phone. She was debating whether to post about her experience on social media when she noticed a notification, a message request from a stranger. Curious, she opened it. The sender was a fellow passenger from Flight 378, a woman named Mia who had witnessed the entire ordeal. "Hi, Dr. Williams." The message read, "I just wanted to say I'm so sorry for what happened to you on the flight. It was completely unacceptable, and I can't believe no one stepped in. I've already contacted the airline to file a complaint on your behalf." Amanda felt a swell of gratitude, and something else. Hope. Maybe she wasn't as alone in this as she'd thought. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a direct message on Twitter. It was another passenger, sharing a video clip they had taken during the altercation. The caption read, "This is what happened when Dr. Amanda Williams tried to claim her rightful first-class seat. Hashtag Elite Skyways, hashtag Justice for Amanda." The video was shaky, but clear enough to capture the pivotal moment when Captain Turner shoved Amanda back, the collective gasp of the passengers audible in the background. Within minutes, the clip had gained traction, with comments pouring in from people expressing outrage and support. The captain confronted. Captain Jack Turner, oblivious to the mounting fallout, strode through the terminal after landing the plane. He was met by the airline's operations chief, who greeted him with a strained smile. "Captain Turner, we need to have a word," she said, gesturing for him to follow her. Turner frowned but complied, his confidence unwavering. In his mind, he had handled the situation with the decisiveness required to maintain order. Passengers who challenged his authority were distractions, and he had no patience for them. But as he entered the small conference room where the operations chief had led him, Turner's confidence began to waver. The room was filled with executives, their faces grim. At the head of the table sat Jack Green, the CEO, whose expression was a mask of barely contained anger. "Captain Turner," Green began, his voice icy. "Do you have any idea who you just mistreated on that plane?" Turner's frown deepened. "I was enforcing protocol, sir. The passenger was disruptive and refused to cooperate." Green leaned forward, his tone laced with disbelief. "That passenger was Dr. Amanda Williams, the daughter of Charles Williams." The color drained from Turner's face. He opened his mouth to respond, but Green cut him off. "Do you understand the gravity of what you've done? This isn't just a customer complaint. This is a PR disaster waiting to explode." Turner swallowed hard, his mind racing. I didn't know who she was." "That's the problem," Green snapped. "You shouldn't need to know someone's name or status to treat them with respect. Your behavior was unacceptable. Full stop." As the weight of his actions began to sink in, Turner realized that his career, and perhaps more, was now on the line. Amanda's resolve. By the time Amanda left the airport, her phone was flooded with messages of support from friends, colleagues, and complete strangers. The video had gone viral, sparking a nationwide conversation about systemic racism and accountability in the airline industry. Amanda sat in the back of a sleek black car, watching the city lights blur past her window. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. "This isn't just about you. It's about the message they sent." For the first time in hours, Amanda felt a spark of determination. She wasn't just going to let this moment pass. She was going to turn it into a movement. She opened her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she drafted a statement. The world needed to hear her story, not just for her sake, but for everyone who had ever been made to feel like they didn't belong. The power of a movement. Amanda's words poured onto the screen, each keystroke an act of defiance against the humiliation and injustice she had experienced. Her statement was raw, unapologetic, and deeply personal, a story that transcended her own experience to reflect a broader reality faced by many others. She began with the facts. "Today, I experienced a moment that I've worked my entire life to prevent, not just for myself, but for anyone who looks like me. I was forcibly removed from a first-class seat I had paid for, not because of any fault of my own, but because someone decided I didn't belong there. This is not just about me. This is about the countless people who face prejudice in spaces they've earned a right to occupy. I won't be silent about it." As she wrote, Amanda felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She understood the risks of speaking out, especially in a world where stories like hers could easily be twisted or dismissed. But she also recognized the opportunity to use her platform for something greater than herself. When the statement was complete, she uploaded it to her social media accounts, along with the video clip sent by the passenger. Within minutes, notifications began pouring in. Likes, comments, shares. Her story was resonating, sparking a wave of outrage and support. The public backlash. By morning, the video had amassed millions of views, and #JusticeForAmanda was trending across multiple platforms. News outlets picked up the story, dissecting every detail of the incident. Pundits debated the implications on live television, and commentators from all walks of life weighed in on the broader themes of systemic racism and abuse of power. The responses were overwhelming. Civil rights organizations issued statements condemning the airline's actions, while prominent figures voiced their support for Amanda. Celebrities retweeted her post, adding their own messages of solidarity. Activists organized online campaigns, calling for boycotts of elite skyways until accountability was ensured. Meanwhile, the airline's social media accounts were flooded with angry comments. People demanded answers, with many vowing never to fly with the company again. The #elitfails began trending alongside #JusticeForAmanda, further amplifying the pressure on the airline to respond. The Williams family takes action. In his sprawling home office, Charles Williams sat at the head of a large conference table, surrounded by his legal and public relations teams. The morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, but the atmosphere in the room was anything but bright. Charles's face was a mask of controlled fury as he addressed the room. "This isn't just about what happened to Amanda," he began, his voice calm but commanding. This is about the systemic disrespect that people like us face every day. We're going to make an example out of this situation, not for revenge, but for change. The head of his legal team, a sharp-eyed woman named Carla Reyes, nodded. We've reviewed the video and the eyewitness accounts, Mr. Williams. There's a clear case for both civil and criminal action against the airline and Captain Turner. We can file suit immediately. Charles leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. I want to do more than sue them. I want policy changes. I want training programs. I want an apology, not just to Amanda, but to every passenger who's been mistreated. Carla exchanged a glance with the PR team's leader, a young strategist named Jordan Malik. We can push for all of that, Jordan said. But we need to be strategic. The public is already on Amanda's side, and the video has gone viral. This is the perfect moment to amplify her voice and demand systemic change. Charles nodded. Good. Let's start with a press conference. Amanda and I will both speak. The airline scrambles to respond. At Elite Skyways headquarters, CEO Jack Green was facing one of the most challenging days of his career. The company's PR team was in crisis mode, drafting statements and coordinating with legal advisors. Green paced his office, his phone buzzing incessantly with calls from board members, investors, and reporters. How bad is it? Green asked his chief communications officer, Linda Patel. Linda, who looked like she hadn't slept in days, sighed. Bad. The video has over 10 million views, and every major news outlet is covering the story. We're being accused of racial bias, poor customer service, and a lack of accountability. Our stock has already taken a hit, and if this continues, we could lose some of our biggest corporate clients. Green rubbed his temples. What do we do? Linda hesitated. We need to issue a public apology, immediately, and we need to suspend Captain Turner pending an investigation. If we don't act fast, this will spiral even further out of control. Green grimaced. Fine. Draft the apology and have it ready for me to approve within the hour. And get Turner in here. I want to hear his side of the story. The press conference. 2 days later, Amanda and Charles Williams stood side by side at a podium in front of a sea of reporters. Cameras flashed, and microphones were thrust forward as the crowd buzzed with anticipation. Amanda took a deep breath before stepping forward. Her heart pounded, but she refused to let her nerves show. This was her moment to speak not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been silenced. Good morning, she began, her voice steady. What happened to me on Flight 378 was not an isolated incident. It was a symptom of a larger problem, one that extends far beyond a single airline or a single captain. It's about a culture that tolerates prejudice and mistreatment, often at the expense of those who have worked the hardest to succeed. The room fell silent, her words hanging in the air. I'm not here to play the victim, Amanda continued. I'm here to demand accountability, not just for myself, but for every person who has been told they don't belong, who has been judged unfairly, and who has been denied the respect they deserve. Charles stepped forward next, his towering presence commanding the room. As a businessman, I've always believed in building systems that work for everyone. But when those systems fail, it's our responsibility to call them out and demand change. My daughter's experience was unacceptable, and we will not rest until Elite Skyways, and the industry as a whole, implements meaningful reforms. The crowd erupted in applause as father and daughter stood united, a powerful image of resilience and determination. The aftermath. The press conference was a turning point. Public support for Amanda swelled, and the pressure on Elite Skyways intensified. The airline issued a formal apology, suspended Captain Turner, and announced plans to implement mandatory bias training for all employees. They also pledged to review and revise their policies to ensure fair treatment for all passengers. But Amanda wasn't finished. She partnered with several civil rights organizations to launch a new initiative aimed at addressing discrimination in travel and hospitality. The initiative, called Sky's the Limit, focused on advocacy, education, and accountability, with a mission to create a more inclusive industry. For Amanda, the ordeal was a painful reminder of the challenges that still existed, even for someone as accomplished as herself. But it was also a catalyst, a moment that ignited a movement and proved the power of standing up against injustice. As she stood on the stage at the initiative's launch event, surrounded by supporters, Amanda felt a sense of fulfillment she hadn't experienced before. She had turned a moment of pain into a platform for change, and in doing so, she had reclaimed her voice and her power. The ripple effect. The captain's reckoning. Captain Jack Turner sat stiffly in the plush, leather chair across from Jack Green, Elite Skyway's embattled CEO. The atmosphere in the executive suite was frigid, the tension palpable. Turner, who had prided himself on decades of service and countless successful flights, now found himself in the hot seat, his career hanging by a thread. "This is an unprecedented mess," Turner, Green said, his voice cold and clipped. "The video of you shoving Dr. Amanda Williams has gone viral. Do you even understand the magnitude of what you've done?" Turner leaned forward, attempting to defend himself. "Sir, with all due respect, I was enforcing order. She was disruptive and refused to comply. I didn't know who she was." Green slammed his fist on the desk, his composure cracking for a brief moment. "You didn't need to know who she was to treat her with basic respect. What were you thinking? Pushing a passenger? Dismissing her out of hand? You've single-handedly dragged this airline's name through the mud." Turner sat back, his face pale. "I made a mistake," he admitted, his voice low. "I was frustrated, and I acted rashly." "A mistake," Green repeated, his voice dripping with incredulity. "This isn't a mistake, Turner. This is a scandal. You're suspended effective immediately, pending the outcome of the investigation. And I'll be blunt, if I have my way, you'll never captain another plane for this airline." Turner opened his mouth to argue but stopped. Deep down, he knew Green was right. His arrogance and temper had not only jeopardized his career but had also exposed the deep biases he carried for years. As he left the office, the weight of public scrutiny settled heavily on his shoulders. The grassroots movement. As Amanda's story continued to dominate headlines, a groundswell of grassroots support began to emerge. Social media platforms buzzed with personal stories from people who had faced similar experiences. The hashtag Justice for Amanda evolved into #FlyFair, a larger campaign advocating for equity and accountability in the airline industry. Community leaders and activists organized rallies outside Elite Skyway's headquarters, demanding systemic changes. At one such rally, a young woman named Tasha Jackson took the stage to share her story. "I'm not a billionaire or a CEO," Tasha began, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm just a teacher who wanted to visit my family last Christmas. But when I tried to board my flight, I was told my ticket wasn't valid, despite having the receipt in my hand. They looked at me like I didn't belong, and I had no one to stand up for me. What happened to Amanda isn't just her story, it's all of ours." The crowd erupted in applause, a sea of faces united by shared frustration and determination. Signs waved in the air with slogans like "Equal treatment for all passengers" and "Racism has no place at 30,000 feet." The energy was electric, a tangible force driving change. Amanda watched the rally unfold via livestream, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and sadness. She hadn't anticipated that her ordeal would spark such a widespread movement, but she was grateful for the momentum it had created. Corporate fallout. The ripple effects of the scandal were felt far beyond Elite Skyways. Competitor airlines began issuing statements of solidarity, pledging to review their own policies and implement bias training for staff. Some skeptics dismissed these moves as performative, but others saw them as a step in the right direction. Elite Skyways, however, continued to bear the brunt of public outrage. Shareholders demanded an emergency meeting to address the crisis, with some questioning Green's ability to lead the company through the storm. In the boardroom, Tensions ran high as Green defended his actions. "We've already issued a public apology and suspended Captain Turner," he argued. "We're working with Dr. Williams to address her concerns and implement meaningful changes. What more do you want?" A shareholder, a stern-looking woman with sharp features, leaned forward. "What we want, Mr. Green, is to restore the public's trust. Right now, this airline is a symbol of systemic failure. And if we don't turn that narrative around, we'll lose everything." Green clenched his jaw. He knew she was right. The airline had to do more than just apologize. It had to rebuild its image from the ground up. Amanda's next move. Amanda sat in her sunlit home office, surrounded by stacks of papers and her laptop, which displayed an overwhelming number of emails and notifications. Offers of support, collaboration requests, and media inquiries flooded her inbox. It was exhilarating, but also exhausting. Her father entered the room, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. "You've been at this all day," Charles said, setting one mug on her desk. "You need to take a break." Amanda smiled faintly, appreciating the gesture but shaking her head. "I can't, Dad. This isn't just about me anymore. It's grown into something so much bigger." Charles sat across from her, his gaze steady. "I know, and I'm proud of you for taking this on. But you don't have to do it alone." Amanda sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I know. It's just, I want to make sure we're not just reacting to what happened. I want this movement to create lasting change." Charles nodded. "Then let's make a plan. We have the resources, the connections, and now the public's attention. How do we turn this into a platform that drives real systemic reform?" Amanda's eyes lit up as the beginnings of an idea took shape. She grabbed a notepad and began jotting down thoughts. "What if we launch an independent watchdog organization, something that monitors not just airlines, but all major industries for discriminatory practices?" Charles leaned forward, intrigued. "That's ambitious. But if anyone can pull it off, it's you." The airline's pledge. Under mounting pressure, Elite Skyways announced a partnership with Amanda and her newly established organization, Equity in Flight, to address issues of bias and inequality in the industry. The partnership included mandatory bias training. All airline employees, from pilots to gate agents, would undergo rigorous training to address unconscious bias and promote inclusivity. Diversity audits. A third-party firm would conduct regular audits of hiring, promotion, and customer service practices to ensure fairness. Passenger advocacy programs. A hotline and support system for passengers to report incidents of discrimination or mistreatment. At a joint press conference, Amanda stood beside Jack Green as he detailed the airline's commitment. While some questioned Green's sincerity, Amanda saw the partnership as a necessary step toward change. "This is just the beginning," Amanda said, addressing the crowd. "Accountability isn't a one-time event. It's a continuous process. I'll be watching closely to make sure these promises are kept." A growing legacy. As the weeks turned into months, the impact of Amanda's story continued to resonate. Equity in Flight gained traction as a powerful advocacy group, with chapters forming in major cities across the country. Amanda became a sought-after speaker, using her platform to inspire others and push for systemic reform. For Amanda, the journey was far from over. She knew the fight for equity and respect was ongoing, but she also knew she wasn't alone. The movement she had helped spark was bigger than any one person, an unstoppable force fueled by the collective will of those who demanded change. The intersection of power and justice. The captain's fallout. Captain Jack Turner sat alone in his modest suburban home, the faint hum of the evening news playing in the background. The same story had been running for weeks: Amanda Williams' ordeal, the airline's response, and the broader societal reckoning it had triggered. For Turner, this wasn't just a story. It was the end of a career he had built over decades. His suspension had quickly escalated into termination after an internal review. The airline's leadership, desperate to salvage their reputation, had severed ties with him. What stung more than the loss of his job, however, was the public condemnation. His name was now synonymous with systemic bias and abuse of power. He couldn't go to the grocery store without enduring sidelong glances, whispers, and outright disdain. For the first time, Turner was forced to confront his own actions. He replayed the incident in his mind, each detail sharper than the last. The look in Amanda's eyes when he dismissed her, the collective gasp of the passengers when he shoved her, the silence that had followed. Turner had always prided himself on his authority, but now he realized how blind he had been to the privilege that came with it. His assumptions about Amanda, about her intentions, her worth, were rooted in biases he had never questioned. And now he was paying the price. In an uncharacteristic moment of vulnerability, Turner picked up his phone and searched for Amanda's name. Her organization, Equity in Flight, was everywhere. She had turned her humiliation into a movement that was reshaping industries. For a moment, Turner considered reaching out. What would he even say? Sorry. Would it mean anything? He put the phone down and stared at the wall, the weight of his regrets pressing down on him. The boardroom battle. At Elite Skyway's headquarters, the fallout from the scandal continued to ripple through the company. Shareholders, increasingly frustrated by the airline's plummeting stock value, demanded sweeping changes. This company has become a symbol of failure, one board member declared during an emergency meeting. We've lost public trust, and our competitors are capitalizing on our mistakes. What's the plan to fix this? Jack Green, the embattled CEO, adjusted his tie and stood. The partnership with Dr. Williams and her organization is already underway. Bias training is being implemented, and we're conducting a full audit of our policies and practices. Another board member, a younger man with a sharp tone, interjected. That's not enough. We need leadership changes. The public wants accountability, and that starts at the top. Green bristled. I've led this company for 10 years, through ups and downs. This situation is unprecedented, yes, but we're taking action. The room erupted into heated debate, with some board members calling for Green's resignation and others defending his leadership. The tension was a microcosm of the larger societal conflict Amanda's story had unearthed, a battle between maintaining the status quo and embracing meaningful change. Amanda's growing influence. While the airline grappled with internal turmoil, Amanda's influence continued to expand. Her organization, Equity in Flight, had quickly become a powerhouse in the advocacy world. Corporations from various industries began reaching out for guidance on addressing bias and promoting inclusivity. What had started as a response to her personal ordeal had grown into a nationwide movement. Amanda's days were filled with meetings, speeches, and strategy sessions. Despite the whirlwind of activity, she remained deeply involved in every decision her organization made. For Amanda, this wasn't just about policy, it was personal. One afternoon, Amanda met with a group of young activists who had been inspired by her story. They were eager, full of ideas, and determined to make a difference. You've shown us what's possible, one of them said, a young man named Caleb. But how do we make sure this isn't just a moment? How do we turn it into a lasting change? Amanda smiled, recognizing the same fire in their eyes that had driven her throughout her career. It starts with consistency, she said. Change doesn't happen overnight. It takes sustained effort, collaboration, and the courage to keep pushing, even when it feels like nothing is changing. The group nodded, their resolve strengthened. Amanda felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was bigger than her. It was about empowering others to take up the mantle and continue the fight. The public debate. As the weeks went on, Amanda's story continued to dominate public discourse. Talk shows hosted panel discussions about racism, privilege, and accountability. Some commentators praised Amanda for her courage, while others accused her of overreacting or using her father's influence to further her agenda. One evening, Amanda appeared on a primetime news program for a live interview. The host, a seasoned journalist known for asking tough questions, didn't hold back. Dr. Williams, The host began. Some critics have argued that you're leveraging your family's wealth and influence to amplify your story. How do you respond to those claims? Amanda didn't flinch. This isn't about wealth or influence, she said calmly. It's about equity. What happened to me could happen to anyone, regardless of their status or success. My story just happened to shine a light on a problem that's been ignored for too long. If using my platform means we can address these issues, then so be it. The host nodded, impressed by her composure. And what do you say to those who believe this is an isolated incident, rather than a systemic issue? Amanda leaned forward slightly, her gaze steady. If it were isolated, we wouldn't see the overwhelming number of people coming forward with similar stories. This isn't just about one airline or one captain. It's about a culture that tolerates bias and inequality. We can't fix what we don't acknowledge. The interview concluded with a standing ovation from the live audience, cementing Amanda's role as a leader in the fight for justice. Turner's letter. One quiet evening, Amanda sat at her desk, catching up on emails. Among the usual flood of messages was one with an unexpected sender, Jack Turner. The subject line read simply, an apology. Amanda hesitated before opening it, unsure of what to expect. The email was short but heartfelt. Dr. Williams, I want to start by saying how deeply sorry I am for my actions. What I did to you was wrong, plain and simple. I acted out of ignorance and arrogance, and I have no excuse. Your courage in standing up for what's right has made me reflect on my own biases and failures. I've started bias training on my own, and I'm committed to learning and growing from this experience. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I needed to say this. Sincerely, Jack Turner. Amanda stared at the screen, her emotions a complex mix of anger, relief, and empathy. She didn't know if she could forgive him, but his acknowledgement felt like a step in the right direction. A movement solidified. As Amanda reflected on her journey, she realized that her story had become a catalyst for something far greater than she had ever imagined. The airline industry, and society at large, was being forced to confront uncomfortable truths. Conversations about bias, privilege, and accountability were happening in boardrooms, classrooms, and living rooms across the country. For Amanda, the fight was far from over. But as she stood before a packed auditorium at the annual Equity in Flight Summit, she felt a profound sense of hope. The audience, a diverse tapestry of faces, looked to her not just as a leader, but as a symbol of resilience and change. This movement isn't about me, Amanda said, her voice steady and strong. It's about all of us. Together, we're proving that no matter how high the barriers, no matter how entrenched the systems, change is possible. And it starts with each of us refusing to stay silent. A crowd erupted into applause, their energy a reminder of the power of collective action. For Amanda, the journey had only just begun, but she was ready to face whatever came next. A new standard, the summit of change. Months after the incident that sparked a nationwide reckoning, Amanda Williams stood at the helm of a historic gathering. The Equity in Flight Global Summit was a bold initiative organized by her advocacy group, drawing leaders from industries as varied as aviation, tech, education, and government. The event's focus was clear, addressing systemic inequities and creating actionable frameworks for change. The summit, held in a sprawling convention center in Washington, D.C., was packed with attendees. CEOs of major airlines, policymakers, grassroots activists, and everyday citizens filled the seats. Panels featured discussions on everything from unconscious bias to corporate accountability, and workshops aimed to equip participants with tools for implementing equity-focused policies in their respective fields. Amanda opened the event with a keynote speech that was equal parts personal and visionary. What happened to me was not an anomaly, she began, her voice carrying through the hall. It was a symptom of a much larger problem, one that thrives in silence and inaction. Today, we're here to challenge that silence, to face the uncomfortable truths and commit to doing better, not just for ourselves, but for the generations that follow. Her words drew a standing ovation, but Amanda knew that speeches alone wouldn't be enough. What mattered was what came after, the actions, the follow-through, the measurable change. Captain Turner's redemption. In an unexpected turn of events, Jack Turner, the now infamous former captain, reached out to Amanda with a request. He wanted to speak at the summit. It was a bold move, and one that Amanda initially hesitated to consider. Could the man who had humiliated her in front of a plane full of passengers truly contribute to the conversation? Or was this an attempt to salvage his reputation? After much deliberation, Amanda agreed, with one condition. Turner's participation would focus on what he had learned from the incident and how others could avoid making the same mistakes. When Turner took the stage during a panel on accountability, the audience was visibly skeptical. He began nervously, but as he spoke, his tone became more reflective. "I won't stand here and ask for forgiveness," Turner said, his voice tinged with regret. "What I did was wrong, and no apology can erase the harm I caused. But I'm here because I want to be part of the solution. I spent the last few months examining my biases and learning how they influenced my actions, and I've realized that change isn't just about policies. It's about mindset. It's about questioning the assumptions we carry and being brave enough to admit when we're wrong." His honesty disarmed some of the skepticism in the room. By the end of his speech, Turner had made an impression, not as a hero, but as a cautionary tale of what unchecked power and bias could lead to. A landmark agreement. The highlight of the summit came on the final day, during a signing ceremony that Amanda had worked tirelessly to bring to fruition. Elite Skyways, along with representatives from 10 other major airlines, signed the Equity in Aviation Charter, a groundbreaking commitment to fostering inclusivity and addressing systemic disparities within the industry. The charter outlined several key initiatives. Mandatory equity training. All employees, from executives to flight crews, would undergo annual training on equity and inclusion. Passenger advocacy programs. Each airline would establish independent bodies to handle complaints of bias or discrimination, ensuring accountability. Diversity targets. Airlines committed to increasing representation of underrepresented groups in leadership and operational roles within 5 years. Transparency reports. Annual public reports detailing progress on equity initiatives would be published. Amanda stood alongside the CEOs as they signed the charter, a sense of accomplishment washing over her. This was a tangible step forward, a way to ensure that what happened to her wouldn't happen to others. "This isn't the end," Amanda said as she addressed the crowd after the signing. "This is the beginning of a new standard. A standard where equity isn't just an aspiration, but a reality." Building bridges. Despite the progress being made, Amanda knew that real change required collaboration across all levels of society. She began visiting schools and community centers, speaking with young people about their experiences and aspirations. These interactions grounded her, reminding her why the fight for equity mattered so deeply. At one event in Atlanta, a young girl approached Amanda after her speech. The girl, no older than 10, held a notebook filled with doodles and notes. "Dr. Williams," the girl said shyly, "do you think someone like me could do what you do someday?" Amanda knelt to meet the girl's gaze. "Absolutely," she said with a warm smile. "The world needs your voice, your ideas, and your courage. Don't ever let anyone tell you that you don't belong." Moments like these fueled Amanda's resolve. She saw herself in that little girl. The same curiosity, the same determination to carve out a place in the world. And she knew that her work wasn't just about addressing the present. It was about shaping the future. A movement expands. As equity in flight grew, Amanda and her team began to tackle inequities in other industries, using the aviation charter as a blueprint. Tech companies, financial institutions, and even sports organizations sought their expertise in addressing bias and promoting diversity. One notable collaboration was with a major technology firm that had faced criticism for its lack of diversity in leadership. Amanda worked closely with their executives to develop a comprehensive equity plan, resulting in a dramatic increase in representation and employee satisfaction within 2 years. The success of these initiatives solidified Amanda's reputation as a transformative leader. She was no longer just a symbol of resilience. She was a driving force for change on a global scale, a personal triumph. While Amanda's professional life soared, her personal journey also took on new dimensions. The incident on Flight 378 had forced her to confront long-held fears about visibility and vulnerability. For years, she had preferred to operate behind the scenes, letting her work speak for itself. But now, she embraced her role as a public figure, using her voice to advocate for others. Her relationship with her father, Charles, deepened as well. The two had always shared a mutual respect, but their collaboration on the movement brought them closer. One evening, as they reviewed plans for the next phase of equity in flight, Charles looked at his daughter with pride. "You've turned a moment of injustice into a lifetime of impact," he said. "I couldn't be prouder." Amanda smiled, her eyes misting with emotion. "I learned from the best," she replied. A legacy defined. Years later, Amanda's story remained a touchstone for progress. The Equity in Aviation Charter had become a model for other industries, and Equity in Flight had grown into a global organization. Amanda herself had authored a best-selling memoir, Sky High, turning adversity into advocacy, which inspired countless individuals to take up the mantle of change in their own lives. As she stood on the stage at a gala celebrating the 5th anniversary of the Charter, Amanda looked out at the audience, a diverse tapestry of faces united by a shared commitment to equity. "This journey began with a single moment," she said, her voice steady. "But it has grown into a movement that belongs to all of us. Together, we've proven that change is possible. And together, we'll continue to reach for new heights." The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers echoing through the hall. For Amanda, it was a moment of reflection and resolve. The fight for justice was ongoing, but she was ready, empowered by the knowledge that the movement she had built would endure, lifting others long after she was gone. A legacy fulfilled. Revisiting the past. The gala's energy was electric, but Amanda found herself drawn to a quiet corner as the event began to wind down. She stared at the stage where she had just delivered her speech, the applause still echoing in her mind. While the celebration was a testament to how far they had come, it also reminded her of the day that had started it all. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced down to see a message from Caleb, one of the young activists she had mentored. It read, "Thank you for everything, Dr. Williams. You've changed my life, and the lives of so many others. We'll carry this forward." Amanda smiled, her heart swelling with pride and gratitude. It wasn't just her journey anymore. It was a collective mission that had taken root in the hearts of countless others. But tonight wasn't just about celebrating progress. It was about remembering the struggle and honoring those who had contributed to the cause. Across the room, Amanda spotted her father. Charles Williams was deep in conversation with a group of corporate leaders, but when he saw her watching, he excused himself and walked over. "You've done it, Amanda," he said, his voice filled with pride. "This movement you've built, it's unstoppable." Amanda shook her head, her smile humble. "It's not just me, Dad. It's all of us. You, the team, the people who believed in what we're fighting for. And the work isn't done. It never will be." Charles placed a hand on her shoulder. "True, but you've ensured that the work will continue. That's the real legacy." The final reconciliation. A week after the gala, Amanda received an unexpected package at her office. Inside was a handwritten letter from Jack Turner, along with a copy of a book on equity and inclusion. The letter was far more personal than his previous email. "Dr. Williams, I know I may never fully earn your forgiveness, but I wanted to thank you. Your courage forced me to confront parts of myself I had ignored for far too long. I spent these months trying to understand the harm I caused, not just to you, but to the countless others who have faced similar injustices. I started volunteering with a community group focused on anti-bias education, It's a small step, but one I hope will lead to a better understanding of how I can contribute to the change you've inspired. Thank you for teaching me, through your strength and grace, what leadership truly means. Sincerely, Jack Turner. Amanda read the letter twice, her emotions a swirl of surprise and cautious hope. She didn't respond immediately, but kept the letter in her desk drawer as a reminder that change, while slow and painful, was possible, even for those who had been part of the problem. The end of the beginning. As the years passed, Amanda's work continued to evolve. Equity in flight expanded its reach, influencing industries and governments worldwide. The airline industry saw measurable progress in diversity and accountability, with other sectors following suit. Amanda herself remained at the forefront, not as a solitary figure, but as part of a collective effort that spanned generations. Her story was taught in schools, her memoir became a source of inspiration, and her speeches were shared across platforms. But she never lost sight of the individuals who had made the movement possible, the passengers who spoke up, the activists who joined the cause, and the allies who refused to stay silent. One day, while walking through an airport terminal, Amanda noticed a young woman sitting at a gate, engrossed in a book. As Amanda passed, she saw the title, Sky High, Turning Adversity into Advocacy. The young woman glanced up, her eyes widening in recognition. "Dr. Williams?" she asked, her voice filled with awe. Amanda smiled warmly. "Yes, that's me." The young woman stood, clutching the book. "Your story changed my life. I'm studying to become a lawyer now, so I can fight for people who face the same injustices you did." Amanda's heart swelled with emotion. "That's wonderful to hear. Remember, the fight is long, but it's worth it. Stay strong, and never stop believing in the change you can create." The woman nodded, her determination shining through. As Amanda walked away, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The movement was no longer just hers. It belonged to the world. The final flight. Years later, Amanda found herself on another flight, this time as a guest of honor for a major international conference on equity and justice. As she settled into her first-class seat, she thought back to that fateful day on Flight 378. So much had changed, yet the memory remained vivid, a reminder of how a single moment could ignite a revolution. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing their departure. Amanda glanced out the window, watching the runway blur as the plane ascended into the sky. She felt a sense of peace, knowing that she had turned pain into progress, and progress into purpose. The world was far from perfect, but it was better. And for Amanda, that was enough. As the plane leveled out, Amanda closed her eyes, a smile tugging at her lips. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she could exhale. The future was bright, and she was ready for whatever came next.